afternoon and welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. Got a packed program for you today. A little bit later, we're going to hear from our South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez about a nonprofit that has been helping migrants in Brownsville, Texas for several years now, shutting its doors at the start of the new year. So we'll hear from her in just a bit. But of course, we're going to start by taking a look at today's headline. And the major headline making waves across the world today is the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro declared himself innocent and a decent man as he protested his capture and pleaded not guilty to federal drug trafficking charges in a New York federal courtroom. "I was captured," Maduro said in Spanish, as translated by a courtroom reporter, before being cut off by the judge. Asked later for his plea to the charges, he stated, "I'm innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man, the president of my country." Maduro was making his first appearance in an American courtroom on the narco-terrorism charges the Trump administration used to justify capturing him and bringing him to New York. The courtroom appearance was Maduro's first since he and his wife were captured from their home on a military base in a middle of the night military operation, rather. Trump said the U.S. would, quote, run Venezuela temporarily. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Sunday that it would not govern the country day to day, other than enforcing an existing oil quarantine. A 25-page indictment accuses Maduro and others of working with drug cartels to facilitate the shipment of thousands of tons of cocaine into the United States, and they could face life in prison if convicted. Now, President Trump has repeatedly threatened to take military action against drug cartels in Mexico, and this week he made similar threats again, this time against Mexico, Cuba, and Colombia. This morning, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum responded to his warning, and our El Paso correspondent Julian Resendiz joins us now. He's been covering this. Julian?
Rudy, like you said, this arrest, this apprehension of Nicolas Maduro has had reverberations throughout the world. And it has also touched us here on the U.S.-Mexico border in two particular ways. Number one, there are some Venezuelans here in El Paso who are living here in El Paso who left their country because of what they call the dictatorship. And this weekend, they talked to us, to our friends at KTSM, and they said that primarily they're very happy that there appears to be a regime change, that Maduro's out, and that there's some hope for future prosperity in their country. The other way it reverberates here on the border is we're right next to Mexico. And whatever happens in Mexico affects the border and affects a portion of the U.S. Southwestern population. What we're hearing is that there is some concern among the Mexican people that what the U.S. did in Venezuela could be somehow replicated in the very near future when it comes to drug traffickers. Why? Because drug traffickers, the cartels, have been on President Trump's sites since he took office. In fact, since he was on campaign. There have been a centerpiece of his security strategy, going up against them, making sure that they're apprehended either here in the U.S. or wherever they are, and making sure that the flow of fentanyl and other illegal drugs stops coming into the United States. Now, as far as the fear, the president yesterday, Sunday, told reporters a few things that made Mexicans nervous. We have a clip of the president, Rudy?
And by the way, you have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. We'd love Mexico to do it. They're capable of doing it. But unfortunately, the cartels are very strong.
Claudia Sheinbaum, and you told me at one point you had offered to send U.S. troops into Mexico to combat drug trafficking there. Is that something you have spoken to her about?
I think she's a terrific person. I would say every single time I talk to her, I offer to send troops.
And she's just not willing?
She's concerned. She's a little afraid. The cartels are running Mexico.
There you have it, Rudy. That last statement is very worrisome to people in Mexico, especially since Secretary of State Rubio on Saturday said, look, we have a president and President Trump who doesn't just say things, he does what he says. So if he's saying that he believes that the cartels are running Mexico, that's making people south of the border very nervous. Now, in response, this morning, President Sheinbaum, she repeated something that she said over the weekend, how the sovereignty of countries must be respected, international law must be respected, etc. But she also said something that caught our attention. She said that even if the U.S. were to intervene in Mexico, go into her country and maybe plug some of the drug lords that are still out there running, for instance, the Jalisco New Generation cartel, or the two remaining high-profile sons of Sinaloa cartel co-founder Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Even if that were to happen, it wouldn't really make a difference because she says that the root causes need to be addressed. What are the root causes? Well, on the one hand, you have Mexican young people who lack opportunities and see wealth, future wealth going into the drug trade. And also, we have a huge demand for illegal drugs here in the U.S. That is the reason why Mexican individuals engage in drug trafficking, in the manufacture or in the transportation, the smuggling of drugs. And she says that an intervention would not really do anything for that. But we do have a clip from her from this morning.
There is communication, there is coordination, and we will defend that for many reasons. First, because any intervention would not solve anything, and we have told the United States. Secondly, it's a matter of principle. Mexico defends its sovereignty and its territory. We will defend it, the government and the people.
Yeah, she went on to say something that resonates with a lot of Mexicans, Rudy. Every child who goes to public school learns that back in 1846 there was a war between the U.S. and Mexico, and at the end of that war, 2 years later, the U.S. ended up with half of the Mexican territory, including Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, and other territorial land. So that's in the back of many Mexicans' minds. So that's why she has to put this face forward. Now, on the other hand, she spoke about coordination. Uh, since President Trump took over, Mexico has handed over 55 top-level drug traffickers, drug lords, let's say, to the United States. So that's a proof of the cooperation. Now, as far as the intervention, I think that would be a step that maybe Mexico is not prepared to accept. And I don't know if how far President Trump wants to push this. There are still, like I mentioned before, still some drug lords out there that are doing a lot of damage. Nemesio Ceguera, the leader of the Jalisco cartel, and the sons of El Chapo out there.
You know, one thing that you mentioned was the demand for drugs in the United States, and that's something that President Sheinbaum seems to share with her predecessor AMLO as well, who I think he once said shortly before leaving office that part of the problem is the drugs aren't being used in Mexico. They're being used in the United States.
Well, I think President Sheinbaum certainly puts forth a legitimate point. However, going back to AMLO, I don't think that's the case anymore. Really, right here on the border, on the Mexican side in Juarez, we have an outright street war for the past few years, in which people are killing each other, not so much to smuggle drugs into the U.S., but for control of the crystal methamphetamine sales, El Cristal they call it, which is the most popular drug right now south of the border. So people are dying because of Mexican consumption or Mexican demand as well.
And going back to the point of the sovereignty of the country of Mexico, mentioning what you had said that President Claudia Sheinbaum had said about respecting Mexico's sovereignty, it is kind of a different situation than Venezuela, where the folks were kind of clamoring for a change in the regime, versus Mexico, who has supported Sheinbaum for the most part. What would the difference be? What would the major difference be, rather, when it comes to any kind of United States intervention just south of the border?
I think there's a myriad, Rudy, of differences between Mexico and Venezuela. Venezuela is 2,000 miles away from the U.S.-Mexico border. The Venezuela trade with the U.S. is minimal, whereas the trade between Mexico and the United States is tremendous. Mexico is the U.S. The number one U.S. trading partner. So we have that very strong commercial relations. To your point, yes, President Sheinbaum remains extremely popular, 70, 80% popularity. And what she says doesn't really reflect her point of view so much as the opinion of most, like I said, most Mexican people who go to school and learn that the United States way back then took their territory. And also there's the neighbor element. And she mentioned as much this morning. whether you guys want it or not, we're going to be neighbors forever. There's 40, she mentioned that there's about 40 million people living in the United States who are of Mexican descent, who have something to say about this. I think many of us do want the drug lords captured. They want the drug trade that is killing so many people in Mexico and in the United States should end. But whether that intervention will do anything to that, we don't know yet.
All right. Well, thank you so much for reporting. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more reporting to come throughout the week on this topic as everything kind of unfolds and develops when it comes to the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and the comments that President Trump made regarding Mexico on Sunday. All right. Thank you so much, Julian. Julian Resendiz, our El Paso correspondent. Stay with us. When we come back, South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez is going to join us to talk about that nonprofit that shuttered its doors after helping migrants for several years in the southernmost city in the state of Texas. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas. Going to get to our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez, in just a moment. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at what else is trending across the border. Starting with President Trump has dropped his push to deploy National Guard troops in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Portland, Oregon. Now, this move comes after legal roadblocks held up the effort. Trump had deployed troops to all three cities against the wishes of state and local Democratic leaders. Troops had already left Los Angeles after the president deployed them last year as part of a broader crackdown on crime and immigration. They had been sent to Chicago and Portland, but were never on the streets as legal challenges played out. California has announced plans to delay the revocation of 17,000 commercial driver's licenses until March. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said the state could lose $160 million if it does that. The decision comes after immigrant groups filed a lawsuit. California had decided to revoke the licenses after Duffy pressured the state to make sure immigrants who are in the country illegally aren't granted licenses. The Transportation Department has been prioritizing the issue ever since a truck driver who wasn't authorized to be in the United States caused a crash in Florida that killed 3 people in August of last year. After 7 years and several countless trips south of the border to help migrants, the nonprofit organization known as Team Brownsville has closed its doors. But some of its members have formed a new organization since. What led to the end of the group? Well, South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez joins me now with the details. Hey, Sandra.
Hi, Rudy. Right, it's kind of bittersweet, bitter sad that this organization has shut its doors, but actually several of the members have formed a new nonprofit, and it's called Madrinas de Justicia, or Godmothers for Justice, and they're affiliated with the New York-based nonprofit organization Grannies Respond. And recently I spoke with several of the founding members of Team Brownsville, who, like you said, have been around since 2018 helping migrants. And they told me a little bit about what caused them to come to this decision.
We have to move on toward the future.
Team Brownsville founding member Andrea Rudnick says after 7 years, it's time to change directions. It comes after a year of historic low border crossings as the Trump administration does not allow migrants to claim asylum.
We did lots of really important and wonderful work, and we had volunteers come from all over the country to work with us. Team Brownsville was a great organization.
But after Team Brownsville and other Texas nonprofits that assist migrants were investigated by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, Rudnick says they wanted a fresh image.
We did not feel safe anymore as an organization to continue having a nonprofit that was based here in Texas.
Texas dropped its case after a judge ruled in favor of Team Brownsville, but Rudnick said,
once we were in the clear, we felt like we needed to ally ourselves, to align ourselves with another nonprofit in a different state for support, for protection, so that we could continue doing important work.
So she and several other retirees have formed a new group. It's called Madrinas de Justicia, or Godmothers for Justice. It's affiliated with the New York-based nonprofit group Grannies Respond, and they'll take donations to the Mexican border towns of Reynosa and Matamoros.
We'll probably continue to do what we've done before. We'll provide services to the ones over that are stuck in Mexico because they're certainly not able to come across. So we try to minister them as much as we can with hygiene products or just friendship. You know, going over and giving a happy smile and a hug.
Volunteer Jerry Page says they'll also continue to help migrants with asylum cases here, but they'll focus on those waiting south of the border.
Do they think that there will be a change?
There are some that are still hopeful, and they're holding on to that hope.
So Rudy, as you saw, you know, these ladies, they're retirees, but they are so dynamic, and they have been helping migrants for many years since the first Trump administration. They're determined to continue to do this because they say there are many migrants waiting south of the border who are still, like she said, hopeful. Kathy Harrington was one of the founding members of Team Brownsville, and now she's part of this Madrinas de Justicia. And, you know, they not only helped south of the border, but they helped here. There was a shot there of this welcome center that was operated under the umbrella of the city of Brownsville. And, you know, they operated on the weekends. I was there countless times filming as thousands of people came through. Coincidentally, most of them were Venezuelan. So, you know, it's very topical and timely with what's happening in Venezuela right now. You know, we saw at one point in 2023, we just saw thousands of people crossing per day. I'd say 90% were Venezuelans, and they crossed through Brownsville. They were legally released by the Department of Homeland Security as they made asylum claims, and they were allowed to wait in the United States with temporary protected status. You know, all of that has changed under the second Trump administration. And, you know, part of that led to them closing the doors because there was nobody at the Welcome Center. The Trump administration says, you know, that they are not doing catch and release anymore, that they are not releasing migrants. They have to wait south of the border. There's just no asylum proceedings that are happening. So, you know, they intend to continue to take supplies south of the border to those who are there, and they want to help those who are here who are fearful of ICE and who need help or who have pending cases.
You know, what's interesting about what you just said was talking about the thousands of most of the Venezuelan individuals, migrants coming through their doors. I remember when Team Brownsville first got started, you know, and they would be on Facebook posting, you know, help us with donations, you know, toiletries, clothes, things to help these individuals, eventually getting to the point where, like you said, they have that brick and mortar shop that was kind of on loan to them from the city of Brownsville, but it was right across the corner from the bus station.
The bus station, yeah.
And the bus station kind of served as the main focal point, especially in 2023, for migrants coming through, because was kind of their last stop out of the state of Texas. Tell us about, you know, what was happening directly across the street in that first floor of the city of Brownsville's parking garage.
Yeah, you know, the migrants would come in, and the first thing you would notice is they didn't have shoelaces because those were confiscated by CBP as a safety danger. And so they would give them shoelaces or new shoes. They would give them a backpack with toiletries, a blanket for a bus ride. They would give them travel advice, and occasionally there were, you know, travel tickets that they helped them with for some very vulnerable situations, like, you know, indigenous families who didn't speak Spanish or English, who maybe had a special needs child traveling. They would, you know, find donors to help them. You know, and they took a lot of criticism for this kind of outreach. You know, these ladies, Andrea's 65, the other two ladies, Jerry Page that we saw and Kathy Harrington, well, they're 78. And, you know, two of them have canes, and yet they walk across the bridge. I watched them passing out food at the Welcome Center, you know, stuffing backpacks with toiletries and last-minute goodies for these families, you know, speaking in Spanish to them, offering just, you know, a hug and a smile for years. years. And, you know, I say they shut their doors. They really didn't. They had a storage facility at the end. They didn't have like a standalone brick and mortar place aside from this city of Brownsville unit that they worked out of. So now they have storage facility. They're going to continue to take donations. And, you know, they're going to look around the community, see who they can help here in the Rio Grande Valley. They told me they also went and traveled to Falfurrias, to Brooks County, to talk to Eddie Canales' old operation, which tracks migrants that have died as they try to cross through that brush. And as you know, Eddie died recently, and so, you know, they're going to try to help with that situation. They said they were greatly moved seeing all the pictures of the people who are still missing, and they want to help to connect them. And so, you know, they said that this allows them a broader outreach. And like I said, they're connected with the Grannies Respond, which is out of New York. Coincidentally, 2 years ago, they did a coat drive with Grannies Respond. They have a history, a connection. And, you know, I've spoken to the CEO of the head of Grannies Respond. They're all similar ladies with just tenacity and passion, and you know, they don't want to give up. But Andrea Rudnick said, you know, they just didn't feel safe operating a facility in Texas, that they were the subject of this investigation, which the courts did shoot down. You
know, interestingly enough, across the street in that first floor of the parking garage for the city of Brownsville, right across the street from where they were kind of operating in that building on loan from the city of Brownsville, there was another organization in there that was helping out, and that is the Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, kind of helping migrants during that big surge in 2023, as you mentioned, also drawing the ire of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. So interestingly enough, all of these different organizations were kind of getting on that watch list in these investigations by the state of Texas. So they're not alone in drawing that extra eye.
Compared to the Humanitarian Respite Center here in Brownsville, run by Catholic Charities Director Sister Norma Pimentel, Team Brownsville really was a small, much smaller organization, but they did help thousands and thousands of migrants. And so, you know, I think that they just took a cue. They were represented by the Texas Civil Rights Project. They were very quiet for a while as this whole investigation went on. And I think they just, once it was all cleared, they said, you know, we just want to get out from under Texas. We want to continue doing the work, but we want to do it safely. You know, they told me they felt threatened.
All right. Well, thank you so much for reporting on this, Sandra. We appreciate you being here today. South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez talking about that nonprofit that not so much shuttered their doors, but kind of moved on to hopefully do more work in the future, kind of change the way they operate. Stay with us. We got a couple more headlines to tell you about. Border Report Live will be back in 2 minutes. And welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. Got a few more headlines to tell you about across the border. Moving up north for this next one, Wisconsin Judge Hannah Dugan, who was convicted of obstruction last month for helping an immigrant evade federal officers, has sent her resignation letter to the governor. The letter was sent Saturday. Republicans had been making plans to impeach her ever since her December 19th conviction. Federal prosecutors accused Dugan of distracting federal officers trying to arrest a Mexican immigrant outside her courtroom and leading the man out through a private door. A federal jury convicted her of felony obstruction. Freezing temperatures didn't stop dozens of people from protesting a new ICE detention facility in Roxbury, New Jersey this weekend. More than 100 people took part in the demonstration below freezing temperatures. There are reports the government was planning to open an immigration and customs enforcement detention facility in the area. Last month, the Washington Post reported the Trump administration wants to build 7 large-scale deportation hubs to speed up deportations. One of the locations would be in Roxbury. We've also been covering that extensively, and if you'd like to read more on that, you can also visit borderreport.com. We have all of our reporting from all of our correspondents there that you see here on the program every single day at 2:30 Central Standard Time. And we also have more reporting from across the border, including our continuing coverage of the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. For all the up-to-the-minute updates on everything that's happening with that and everything across the border, remember to visit borderreport.com. And remember, you can also stay informed on the stories shaping the U.S.-Mexico border as Border Report Live brings you real-time updates, expert insights, and voices from both sides of the border in podcast form. You can listen now at any of the apps at the bottom of your screen there, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, as well as the audio and video version of the program on YouTube. And before we go, we did want to remind you to check out our partners at Political Power Ranker. It's a weekly show tracking the movers, shakers, and rule makers in American politics. Nextstar's Director of Political Content, Chris Berg, and Director of Emerson College Polling, Spencer Kimball, break down who's up and who's down in the world of politics based on my favorite thing, and Sandra's too, and that's data. So make sure to check it out. You can find more on Political Power Ranker at abc27.com or your local Nextstar station's website. That's going to do it for us today. We'll see you next time.